Welcome to the Journal Editorial Report. I'm Paul Gigot. As President Trump makes his second visit to flood-ravaged Texas this weekend, the scope of the devastation from Hurricane Harvey continues to unfold. With dozens dead and tens of thousands of people displaced by the storm, Harvey will go down as one of the most destructive and costliest storms in history. But my guest this week gives the response from federal, state, and local authorities high marks so far. Tevi is the former Deputy Secretary of Health and Human Services and author of the book, Shall We Wake the President? 2 Centuries of Disaster Management from the Oval Office. So, Tevi, you literally wrote the book on the history of disaster management. Why do you give this effort so far, and I stress so far, good marks?
Yeah, Paul, thank you for having me. And I noticed you said so far 3 times, and I think that is important because things can always go off the rails. It's a very difficult thing to do. But the first initial phase of the response is in terms of getting the materials to people who need it, making sure that the states and locals and the federals are coordinated, and that you have good people on top of it, people who have practiced and know what they're doing. And so what we have seen thus far is that these things are all coming together, that you do have a top leader in Brock Long over at FEMA.
Right.
He did have practice sessions, tabletop exercises with his cabinet, even on the first day after he was confirmed. And you're also just seeing a lot of good coordination between the states and the federals. You even had the governor of Texas, Governor Abbott, saying that he gives an A+ to the federals for their response. That was not necessarily something we were seeing in Katrina. We weren't getting any A+ grades when I was in the Bush White House at the time.
Right, and so it sounds like one of the lessons here is pre-planning and pre-positioning. You get resources on the ground as the storm is approaching so that once it hits, then you don't have to scramble. You've got people there, they're listening, and they can respond faster. Is that the key to it? One key?
Yeah, that is one key, and they did do that in this case, and you get the materials there and you get the people there, because once the storm hits, it's very hard to get stuff in there. Now you see all these people on the roads and even on the rivers, people are backed up trying to get their boats there to help out. But if you get stuff there in advance, that really helps. And you also said listening. I think that's important. There's a social media component to this. They are using electronic tools to be listening to what people are saying, whether it's Snapchat, Facebook, Twitter, and that is really getting messages out to first responders so that they know where to go.
So yeah, so they're basically listening to social media, watching, and then they can be able to pinpoint where some people are and then send in either the emergency responders or maybe even private people who have a boat available to go in and rescue them. That's interesting, which brings up the point about communications. One of the things here that's interesting is that the cell phone networks have stayed mostly up. Now, why is that? Because that seems crucial when it comes to communicating with people who are stranded and need help.
Well, I think there's 2 things here. First of all, we just have better technology and it's more advanced, but also there have been investments in hardening the systems so that they are more resilient and that they can last when a storm happens. I mean, I remember working in the Bush administration during 9/11, and all of the cell networks went down immediately.
Yeah, absolutely. They were down, no question. You had to use basically packet switching on the internet to be able to communicate. And this time they're hardened. This is something that private companies have made an investment in, correct?
Yeah, and I think that's an important point to make here about the private sector. The private sector plays an important role in this. You can't rely just on the government. As I said, the government is doing a good job in this case, but it's not just the government's job. I think private sector, look, these private sector companies like Twitter and Snapchat have created these separate networks where people can get information, but companies like AT&T and Verizon have also hardened their networks so that the cell towers stay up longer and are more effective.
What about the deployments of the National Guard, which took place relatively early here, as well as firemen and police deployed in Houston? I've seen relatively few reports of looting or criminal behavior. No doubt there is, but relatively few compared to some of these previous disasters.
Yeah, I think that those are both good points. First of all, the National Guard deployment really depends on coordination between the state and the federal government. That was something we didn't really have in Katrina, and that's a challenge. Also, in Katrina, you had large percentages of the New Orleans Police Department not showing up or being MIA. And here in Houston, you're actually seeing the opposite. We saw that terrible incident of that officer who was killed. His mother, his wife, and his father-in-law begged him not to go, and he was so determined to do his duty that he went, but unfortunately he passed away, and we mourn for him. him. But I think you've really seen a sense from the police and the fire department, from the first responders there, that this is their job. They're out doing it, and they're out there saving lives. All
right. Now, where do we go from here in managing this? Because obviously the cameras are going to leave, the water's going to recede, but the mess, the damage is still going to be there. What happens next?
Well, we go from the first initial stage, the response stage, to the recovery stage. And as you said, Paul, that takes a lot longer. It's a lot more expensive. It's very difficult. You have a lot of people who are displaced from their homes. Their homes are destroyed, and you need to get them assistance to see how we can get them back to make Houston the vibrant city that it has been again. So I think that's going to be long. It's going to be costly. It's going to be expensive. And you're going to see a package going forward in Congress over the next month that will provide assistance for this. The Sandy package was about $60 billion. We all know that some of that money did not go to Sandy relief itself, which was unfortunate, but I expect that this package will probably be larger than that.
And temporary housing is going to be a big part of this, because you've got 30,000, 40,000 people in the Houston Sports Center and elsewhere who are displaced.
Yes, temporary housing is a big deal. Unfortunately, with Katrina, we saw that some of those temporary housing became semi-permanent with the FEMA trailers, and I hope that they have come up with better solutions for that. But again, overall, what I've seen is some real learning from the Katrina failures that are making this more of a successful response.
All right, Tevi, Troy, thanks very much for being here.
Thank you.